The Potomac River is being drained right now. Today, up to 5 million gallons of water are vanishing every day for a single building. Gone. That is not a forecast. That is not a worst-case scenario. That is the documented reality of what it takes to power artificial intelligence in Northern Virginia, the river that provides drinking water for 6 million people. Including the capital of the United States, was just named the single most endangered river in America. On June 4, 2026, officials declared a formal drought watch for Washington, D.C., telling residents to conserve. And here is the part nobody is talking about. The crisis isn't just the drought. It's what we chose to build in the middle of it. Hundreds of windowless, humming buildings that are consuming the region's drinking water in secret. And AI is about to make it all so much worse. So, what happens when the thirst of the digital world collides with the survival of the nation's capital? Here is the number you need to hold in your head. Up to 5 million gallons per day for one data center. To put that in terms you can picture, that is the entire daily water consumption of a town of 50,000 people, evaporated, turned into vapor, and lost from the watershed forever. Not for a city, for one building. A building that does not house people, or grow food, or sustain a community. A building that houses servers. Banks of super hot, power-hungry GPUs, processing every AI image you generate, every query you send to a large language model, and there are over 290 of these buildings concentrated in one place. Northern Virginia, the densest cluster of data centers on the face of the earth. That is not an exaggeration. That is not a figure of speech. It is a statement of fact. Roughly 70% of all global internet traffic flows through the servers humming away in Loudoun, Prince William, and Fairfax counties. And as of December 2024, those servers are drinking a river dry. The Virginia Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, a state government oversight agency known as JLARC, published a landmark report on December 9, 2024. The numbers were staggering. Virginia's data centers consumed 2.1 billion gallons of water in 2023, not in a decade, in a single year. That figure represented an 86% increase from just 2019, an explosion in water use that local utilities had never planned for, an invisible drain on a system already under stress. Think about that number, 2.1 billion gallons. And here is where it gets worse. That water is not raw river water. It is not some separate industrial supply. It is potable, drinking quality water pulled directly from the same municipal pipes that serve your kitchen tap. The water is treated by utilities like Fairfax Water and Nesk Water, cleaned to federal drinking standards, and then piped directly into the cooling towers of a hyperscale data center where it is evaporated into the atmosphere. It is gone. It does not return to the river. It does not get recycled. It is a one-way trip, a consumptive use that permanently removes billions of gallons of drinking water from the Potomac River Basin. And the companies doing it are protected by non-disclosure agreements with the local water utilities, actively hiding the true scale of their consumption from the 6 million people who also depend on that water to live. The logic of this is brutally simple. The computer chips used for modern AI run incredibly hot. To prevent them from melting, the buildings use a process called evaporative cooling. It is fantastically efficient at dissipating heat. It is also fantastically water intensive. Water is pumped to the top of massive cooling towers, where it cascades down over a medium while giant fans draw air through it. Some of the water evaporates, carrying heat away with it into the sky. It's the same principle as sweating. The system sweats to cool the machine, but the sweat is drinking water. And the machine is always running. The Potomac River is the sole drinking water source for Washington, D.C., and Arlington County. There is no backup, no second reservoir, no alternative pipeline. If the Potomac runs too low, or if it is ever contaminated, the taps in the nation's capital will run dry. This is not a hypothetical. This is a recognized, present-day threat. On June 17, 2026, regional water companies announced they were launching a $25 million study. A desperate, last-minute search for a backup water source for the D.C. area because for the first time, officials were forced to confront a terrifying reality. The capital of the most powerful nation on Earth has a single point of failure for its water supply. One river. And that one river is now caught between worsening droughts and the unquenchable thirst of an industry that operates in the dark. The Potomac did not always look like this. It was not always on an endangered list. For decades, the river was a symbol of resilience. The nation's river, a waterway that was famously cleaned up from a state of national disgrace in the 1960s to a model of environmental recovery. It supplies water for homes, for businesses, for agriculture, a lifeblood for a sprawling metropolitan region. It was managed, studied, and protected by a coalition of state and federal agencies. But something fundamental changed. A new industry arrived. An industry with an appetite for resources that the river's managers had never factored into their models. For over a decade, Northern Virginia aggressively courted data centers. They offered generous tax exemptions. They promised cheap, reliable energy. They cleared zoning hurdles. It worked. Data Center Alley in Loudoun County became the digital capital of the world, home to roughly 200 data centers alone. A landscape of massive, nondescript concrete boxes that hold the modern world's memory. For years, nobody paid much attention to their water use. The assumption was that it was trivial, a rounding error in the region's overall water budget. Then came the generative AI boom of 2022 and 2023, and the math changed overnight. AI servers do not run like traditional cloud storage. They run hotter, much hotter, and they demand a different kind of cooling. The kind of cooling that turns water into air. Dr. Alamato Sek, a director at the Interstate Commission on the Potomac River Basin, or ICPRB, is one of the scientists tasked with modeling the future of the region's water supply. For the first time, her team began integrating the specific, consumptive water use of data centers into their drought forecasts. The results were alarming. In December 2025, the ICPRB released a forecast study that served as a final warning. The report modeled a scenario that was no longer theoretical: extreme drought conditions, combined with the continued runaway expansion of tech facilities. The conclusion was stark. Under those conditions, the Potomac River region could fail to meet its water supply demands by the year 2030. Failure, not strain, not shortage. The inability to deliver water to everyone who needs it. And just 1 month later, in January 2026, the system was hit with another body blow. A catastrophic 243 million gallon sewage spill entered the Potomac Basin. A disaster that compounded the stress on a river already being stretched to its breaking point. Water quality, water quantity, both under siege at the same time. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The industry driving this crisis is almost entirely unaccountable. A May 2026 study from the University of Illinois and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy identified a massive regulatory gap. The state of Virginia does not require individual data centers to publicly report their water usage. They do not have to. The data is considered a trade secret, shielded from public view by those non-disclosure agreements signed with local water utilities. So you have a situation where a single data center facility can use, and did use, 243 million gallons of water in a single year. That's a real number from the 2024 JLARC report, and nobody knows which company it was. Amazon? Google? Meta? The public that pays for the water infrastructure, the public that is being asked to conserve water during a drought watch, has no right to know which specific corporation is consuming a town's worth of drinking water every single day. Betsy Nicholas, president of the Potomac Riverkeeper Network, is one of the leading advocates fighting for transparency. Her organization is on the front lines, taking legal action and pushing for legislation that would force these companies to disclose what they are taking from a public resource. But the resistance is immense. The tech lobby is one of the most powerful in Virginia, and the state has built a significant part of its modern economy around this one industry, an industry that acts like a vampire. It is windowless, it operates 24/7, and it is silently draining the lifeblood of the community. Water and electricity. Let's talk about that electricity. because the water drain is actually twice as bad as it seems. This is the double drain. The first drain is the direct consumption, the millions of gallons evaporated by the cooling towers on site. But the second drain is indirect, but just as massive. These data centers are the single largest consumers of electricity in the state of Virginia, a demand so colossal it is straining the regional power grid. And how is most of that electricity generated? By thermoelectric power plants. Power plants that themselves require millions of gallons of water for their own cooling processes. So every kilowatt of power an AI server draws from the grid is also drawing water from a river somewhere else. Millions of gallons to cool the servers themselves, and millions more gallons to generate the power to run the servers in the first place. Two drains running at once, with no faucet open to replace what is leaving. On April 13th, 2026, the situation became a national headline. The advocacy group American Rivers released its annual list of the country's most endangered rivers. Number 1 for 2026 was the Potomac. Tom Kiernan, the organization's president and CEO, was unequivocal. The primary threats were the unchecked, sprawling build-out of data centers and the stress from events like the massive sewage spill. It was a formal declaration that the nation's river was in a state of emergency. Pat Calvert, the Virginia Conservation Director for American Rivers, put it in stark terms. The Potomac is at an inflection point and cannot continue to sustain the rapid expansion of water-guzzling data centers drawing from its waters, he said. Act now, or watch this river be detrimentally redefined for the everyday citizen that depends on it. Redefined, that is the word. From a source of life to a utility for machines. The ground zero for this redefinition is not some abstract policy debate in the state capitol. It is happening in places like Prince William County, the new epicenter of the expansion fight. A proposal known as the Prince William Digital Gateway calls for a massive new corridor of data centers sprawling across thousands of acres. Much of this proposed development sits dangerously close to the headwaters of the Occoquan Reservoir, another critical piece of the region's drinking water supply. Environmental groups, led by advocates like Chris Miller, president of the Piedmont Environmental Council, are fighting a desperate battle to stop it. For decades, Miller's organization has worked to protect the farms, forests, and waterways of the Virginia Piedmont. Now they find themselves up against the biggest, most well-funded industry in the world. Miller has been one of the most vocal critics of the state's hands-off approach. He advocates for legislation that would completely flip the economic model, forcing tech companies to bear 90% of the cost for the new grid and water infrastructure their buildings require. Right now, taxpayers are subsidizing the very infrastructure that is being used to drain their own water supply. Chris Miller's view is blunt. Until then, Virginia is allowing big tech demand, which was never anticipated or analyzed with adequate transparency, to break every system it has, including draining a primary source of drinking water for the nation's capital. Break every system it has. That is not hyperbole. That is what we are watching happen in real time. Consider the numbers again. On an average day, data centers account for about 3% of the Potomac Basin's total water consumption. That sounds manageable. But the crisis lives in the extremes. During the peak summer months, when rivers naturally run their lowest and air conditioners are working their hardest, that number spikes. Data center consumption can suddenly account for 8 to 12% of the entire watershed's consumption. A massive slice of the pie, taken at the exact moment the pie is smallest. This is the collision course. The seasonal cycle of the river clashing with the 24/7, 365 demand of the machine. The river has a low season. AI does not. And at the heart of the crisis is Loudoun County, Data Center Alley. In 2023 alone, data centers there consumed 900 million gallons of potable water, a 250% increase over just a few years prior. That is not sustainable growth. That is an explosion. It is a demand spike that no water manager in the world could have reasonably planned for just a decade ago. The people who manage Loudoun Water are now in an impossible position. Caught between their duty to provide water to residents and the contractual obligations to serve an industry that is consuming the resource at an exponential rate. This isn't just about Virginia. This is the first major battleground in a new kind of resource war. A war where the insatiable, abstract needs of the digital cloud manifest as a very real, very physical drain on the environment. Every time you generate an AI image of a fantastical landscape, you are evaporating actual water from an American river. Every time you ask a chatbot to write a poem or summarize a document, you are contributing to the drawdown of the aquifer that supplies a capital city. The connection is no longer metaphorical. It is a direct, mechanical, and measurable process. Lightspeed data transfer in the cloud is paid for with watershed-level water loss on the ground. The convenience of the algorithm is subsidized by the depletion of the river. What does the future look like if this continues? Look at the ICPRB's 2030 forecast. Look at the $25 million panicked search for a backup water source for DC. Look at the most endangered river designation. The warning signs are no longer subtle. They are official declarations. The Digital Gateway Project in Prince William County represents a choice. Does Virginia double down on this path, paving over more watershed land for more data centers, locking in decades of increased water and energy demand? Or does it pause? Does it demand the transparency that has been denied for years? Does it force the industry to pay for its own unprecedented impact, or even force it to use closed-loop cooling systems that recycle water instead of evaporating it? These are the questions local leaders and citizens are grappling with right now. But the clock is ticking. The June 2026 drought watch was not a drill. It was a formal acknowledgement that the river is low, that the rain has not come, and that conservation is now a necessity, not a suggestion. While residents are being asked to use less, a secret, unaccountable industry is being allowed to use more, much more. Years of policy choices, of tax incentives, of quiet zoning approvals created this problem. The assumption was always that the resources, the water, the power, the land, were effectively limitless, that Virginia could absorb this growth without consequence. That assumption has now been proven false. Brutally false. The consequences are arriving. They are arriving in the form of low river gauges, endangered species listings, and drought declarations. The story of the Potomac, in the age of AI, isn't just about one river. It's a preview of what's coming everywhere. As AI becomes more integrated into every aspect of our lives, its physical footprint will only grow. Its demand for power and water will only intensify. What is happening in Northern Virginia today will happen in Ohio, in Arizona, in Oregon tomorrow. Wherever there is an intersection of cheap power and access to water, these digital factories will rise. And they will present every community with the same impossible choice. Sacrifice your most precious natural resource for a stake in the digital economy, or demand a new model where technology serves the community without consuming it. The irony is devastating. An industry built on the ephemeral, on data that exists everywhere and nowhere at once, has a profoundly physical, localized, and destructive impact. You cannot see the data. You cannot hold the algorithm. But you can see the river it is draining. You can stand on the banks of the Potomac and see the water level dropping. The fight over the future of the Potomac is the fight over the future of our relationship with technology itself. Is it a tool we control, or is it a force with appetites so large that they begin to override our own basic needs for survival? A human needs water to drink. An AI needs water to think. In Northern Virginia, right now, those two needs are in direct competition, and one of them has billions of dollars and a phalanx of lobbyists on its side. The final, chilling thought is this: DC has no plan B. The simulations have been run. The warnings have been issued. The river has been declared endangered. The drought watch is in effect, and still more data centers are being proposed. More servers are being installed. The demand curve only points in one direction: up. For an industry that promises a future of limitless information, its impact on the real world is proving to be brutally finite.